Coming up on Photography Online, we tell you what you should be looking for when buying a tripod. We go to the beach in search of British icons to photograph.
It's absolutely awesome.
And we look at what we believe is the best way to scan film. Welcome to Spain and to the July episode of Photography Online, which has you covered for your monthly intake of photography-related tips. As always, we are starting with our photo challenge, which becomes more and more difficult as the available spaces on the watch face disappear and the remaining icons on the list become the more, well, challenging ones. If you have been following the show this year, then you will be up to speed with the concept, but if you're new here, then first of all, you are very welcome, but stick around and you'll soon get the idea as to what the team are up against. A big thank you, as always, to Accurist Watches, who are helping to keep time during the challenge. All right, well, let's see how many of our Great British icons they managed to find this time.
Previously on the Great British Icons Photo Challenge.
I want you to try to fit this list of 24 British iconic subjects into the 12 positions on the watch face, taking each shot exactly on the stroke of each hour.
Anything wrong with that cow?
Yes, it's not next to a phone box.
Yeah, so that's a problem.
We've got literally a few seconds.
Hi, how you doing?
Eye line straight up there.
There's a pub a couple of miles over that way.
We might just have time.
Hurry up, Harry.
Are you in need of a wench?
3, 2, 1.
Damn it.
Do you need an extra hand?
We could always use an extra hand.
We were now halfway through the challenge, with 6 positions on the watch face occupied and 6 still to go. We had so far managed to include 11 of the British icons, which left 13 to find. So I called an emergency meeting to hatch a plan for the next shot.
So let's have a look at the ones that we still need to do. Beatles. Any ideas?
No, they're dead, aren't they?
No, they're not dead. Not at time of recording anyway.
Let's leave that one for a bit then. Royal family. You know the King?
Don't know anyone in the royal family.
Leave that one then. Monty Python.
Well, how are we going to do that?
Well, they're not dead for a start.
Well, no, I know they're not dead.
Right, anyway, let's...
Well, let's leave that. Well, look, it's a nice sunny day. Anyone got anything?
I've got a deck chair here.
Okay, well, that'll work.
That'll work in the sun, won't it?
Yeah, anyone got anything that can go with
Fish and chips?
Yeah, deck chair, fish and chip, both seaside.
Yeah, I do like my fish and chips.
Yeah.
Well, pier, seaside pier.
Well, it's not rocket science, is it? We're in the middle of the country. Where's the nearest kind of place that we could get those 3 things?
Well, the most iconic pier and seaside town there is, Blackpool, huh?
Okay, so listen and learn. Photography is all about visualization. Okay, so all you have to do is visualize the shot in your mind and then create it. So, sandy beach.
Golden.
Let me picture it.
Deck chair, someone sitting in the deck chair, sunbathing under the sun beating down, maybe with some fish and chips and a pier in the background.
Well, this isn't quite the picture you painted, is it, Marcus? I mean, it's a bit bleak. I'm not really convinced by this visualization nonsense.
It's not referring to visualization that, you know, something you have in your mind. It's creating genius with your camera.
Yeah, but
it's that kind of visualization.
Sunshine.
Well, we can sort that out. We don't need to worry about that.
Don't say Photoshop.
Where's the deck chair?
Well, I know, but listen, it's on its way out. The tide's on its way out, correct? Yep. And there's a pier over there, and there's sea, and under the sea there will be beach. We can be sure of that. So if we just sort a few bits and bobs out, we'll get it sorted.
We'll make it work. This is what the challenge is all about.
Okay.
If you say so.
It turns out that the tide moves very slowly when you're watching it and waiting for it to go out. But let me tell you, there's plenty of fun to be had in Blackpool. Eventually the tide did go out, and bit by bit Blackpool Beach slowly revealed itself, so it was time to get to work.
So we got one icon, which is the pier.
Yep.
But we need deck chair and we need fish and chips.
Well, Bagsy fish and chips, because I'm rather hungry and I'll get one for myself as well.
All right, we'll get one for me while you're at it.
Well, I'll sort the chair then.
Well, hang on a minute, we need someone in a chair. We can't just have a deck chair.
Yeah, you can sort that. You're a people person.
I'm a people person.
Bagsy's staying here and looking after the gear.
All right, fine, I'll go and find somebody.
While they all went off to find as many British icons as possible, I had the chance to admire that classic British view of monotonous grey skies over murky grey seas.
So off I went in search of a suitable model, and with a city full of potential subjects, I was confident I'd have this sorted out in no time at all. I just needed to cover some ground, which afforded me the chance to experience all the charm of Blackpool. You would think that finding someone willing to sit in a deck chair with a box of fish and chips would be easy, but I guess such things aren't much of a novelty to the locals around here. Even with the McCormick charm turned up to the very max, I couldn't convince anyone that sitting in a deck chair in this weather would be appealing. Even the seagulls didn't want to know. Surely these two dolly birds will be easy to convince. Maybe not.
Meanwhile, Harry and I hit the tacky seafront stores with our shopping list of items. I don't think you need one of those, Harry. And when it came to getting the fish and chips, I wanted to shop around, as I didn't just want to go to the first one I came across. I mean, this needed to be iconic fish and chips. Eventually, I found one which didn't look like an unplanned trip to hospital was imminent, so I got one for myself, and of course another to use in the photo.
Things were looking up for me too, as I worked the car parks of Blackpool.
Excuse me, sir.
All right.
I'm just down on the beach doing a shot, photographic shot, showing how wonderful Blackpool is. I couldn't borrow you just to sit in a deck chair for 10 minutes or so, could I?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
With the day growing gloomier by the minute, the thought of getting something looking summery was increasingly challenging. But on the positive side, James did turn up with a subject, albeit a rather dodgy looking one.
Right, what we're going to be doing is you're going to be in a deck chair right there.
All right, yeah.
I know there's no deck chair there right now, but there will be a deck chair there sooner rather than later. Ruth, where have you been? It's freezing.
Well, you gave me a credit card, so I went shopping.
You're right, anyway, what the heck? Anyway, what's in there more importantly?
That's a deck chair. Has to be assembled though.
This is something you would assume would be straightforward, but the reality was rather different.
So, deck chair there.
Yep.
We'll simulate the sun with a light.
Yes.
Reflected off of this, which will warm it up.
Yeah, and if not, we can just go direct, but we'll see. Suck it and see.
I think this will give a better, warmer light.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll get Nick to take the shot on his camera, because I don't have mine here.
Yep.
And what kind of lens? It's got to be at least 50 to make that appear reasonably large behind.
Meanwhile, the answer to the question, how many grown men does it take to assemble a deck chair, turns out to be 4.
Height-wise, I think you want to get down quite low here, so that you bring the pier in.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and get the mobile sun and we can have a little experiment. So we've got deck chair, fish and chips. Is it going to be clear that he's eating fish and chips? We can make it so.
Yeah. Well, he can be holding them in his hand
Holding him up like
that.
that. Yeah, fine. That's good. Where's the edge of frame then?
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. There. Yeah. Back.
Right.
There.
So if I do a little line here, we're super safe, yeah?
Yeah. Come and have a seat. Just watch that, it's a bit wet. All right. And then just enjoy the sun.
With everything now in place, and with just a few minutes until we had to take the shot, it was time to test the lighting we'd set up to simulate the non-existent sun.
It's absolutely awesome. It's absolutely...
Do you not need kind of more light kind of in front of him as well?
I mean, you're right, but I quite like it like that.
Okay.
If we can remember those light positions, for somehow we've managed to completely fluke this. It looks unbelievable.
Well, let's get on with it then.
Yeah, I am getting on with it, but we've got about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Upon reviewing the test shot, we wanted to reduce the level of light on the subject's face. If you watched last month's show where we explained all about the inverse square law, then you'll now appreciate how useful this is, as to reduce the light on the subject's face without affecting the rest of the exposure is now simple.
Too hot? Right, okay, we'll just move it back then. Inverse square law and all of that.
There we go.
That'll be at least stop and a half lower there.
Just as we thought we had everything under control, with just a couple of minutes before the 5 o'clock call came in, we had to make a decision.
So what we're going to do, just abandon ship in terms of parasol.
Just lie it next to the chair, I would.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, next to the chair it is.
As if the shot couldn't get more complicated, Marcus came up with a last-minute plan to improve the background.
I've got a handful of chips. When the phone call comes through, if I throw this, they'll be in the air at the time.
Because we have to get something. All the rehearsals, we've now broken the parasol, umbrella, whatever it is. That's knackered.
So next to go is the chair.
Yeah. Well, yeah, before the chair goes, how long we got anyway?
Well, we had a couple, no we don't, we've got 60 seconds.
You're such a clown.
I don't know where my phone is. Are they calling me?
Yes, of course, they call.
Hold
Never
on.
mind,
Right.
just get on with it. Straight past, yeah, right. Yeah, just
30 seconds.
As if you've just got them just ready in your mouth. 30 seconds, Marcus says, what are you doing?
15.
Throw the chips. Not you, him.
Right, here we go.
This is your timekeeping call from
Ready?
Accurist. On the third stroke, the time according to Accurist will be precisely 5 o'clock.
Now.
You can see the rain all over his glasses.
So good.
So we'd somehow managed to cram in 5 icons into one shot. Fish and chips, a pier, an umbrella, a deck chair and a crown to represent the royal family. But we do still have most of the trickier ones still on the list, and only 5 spaces left on the watch face to fit them in.
Next time on the Great British Icons Photo Challenge.
Just take note, this is how you get an animal to a phone box.
Well, it's a bit easier to manoeuvre than a Highland cow.
They are super cute, aren't you?
You turn that over now, see if anything's happened, see if there's any magic. Whoa. The challenge we're going to have here is getting the dog facing the right way.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, well, I'm not certain that simply putting a fake crown on a random stranger qualifies as ticking off royal family, so I'm thinking I might have to go to Steward's inquiry on that one. In recent shows, we've covered topics such as how to use reflectors and the inverse square law, and watching the team there shows just how useful knowledge of these topics can actually be. Once again, thank you to Accurist Watches for helping to keep time on our challenge and making sure that every photo is taken exactly on each hour. If you're looking for the perfect gift for someone special or even for yourself, then do check out accurist.com to see their full range of men's and women's watches. Okay, well, just before we hit play on our next feature, I wanted to let you know that we send out email updates to everyone who's signed up to receive them through our website. These updates announce every time we have a new show or podcast coming out, or anytime we release details of one of our Photography Online adventures trips. If you're not already on the mailing list but would like to keep in touch, simply head to our website, mt2photography.com, and enter your name and email address. You'll then get to hear about everything new on our channel, plus we'll remind you when there are great prizes to be won. On the subject of great prizes, we gave away a ProSpec travel tripod on the podcast last month. The winner was Keith Foster from the UK. Congratulations, Keith, who is now the proud owner of the Kingjoy C83S tripod, simply because he listens to our monthly podcast, which is in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods for all of 2025. If you like what we do here on YouTube, you will love our radio show as well. So simply search for the Photography Online podcast on Google or any of the podcast platforms and it will appear. As well as discussion about the latest photography news and products, there's also the world's best photography quiz, which you can play along with as you listen. If you entered to win the Kingjoy tripod last month but weren't lucky enough to win it, then fear not, as this next feature will no doubt be of interest. We see some very strange decisions being made by photographers when it comes to choosing a suitable tripod, so we thought we'd put together a guide to go over the most important aspects of what to consider when searching for your ideal three-legged friend.
When it comes to choosing photography equipment, it's often easy to select the right camera for your requirements, as models vary massively with their features. The same can be said for lenses, as it's fairly straightforward to select the lens which best suits your specific requirements.
But when it comes to choosing a tripod, such differences between models aren't so obvious.
I mean, all tripods have 3 legs, and their sole purpose is simply to provide a steady platform for your camera. So given this, do we need to deliberate so carefully on which one we buy?
The answer is yes, because in our experience of running workshops and photo adventures all around the world for over 10 years, the one item we see more than any other which has been poorly purchased is the tripod.
So in this feature, we wanted to go over some of the important factors you should consider when choosing one of the most important pieces of photographic equipment. The obvious differences between all the various tripods on the market are ones you'll find listed as selling points, such as maximum height, weight, and minimum height. However, there are many more factors you should consider, which you won't find on any spec sheet, while others, which are listed, really aren't worth worrying about. Let's start with the obvious ones first.
Maximum height. Now, this is important, but maybe not for the reason you think, which is to get the camera to eye level. Taking photos from head height just for convenience purposes is not always the best thing to do. So if you find that you're always extending your tripod just so that it's easy to look through, then you might want to reconsider your compositional choices.
A far more valid reason for wanting a tall tripod is to exclude obstacles in the foreground, such as fences and walls, or to reveal more of the foreground and middle distance in your composition.
Another reason to want a tripod which has a healthy maximum height is when working on a hillside. In this situation, at least one of the legs will be on the lower area of ground, meaning that it will drastically reduce the working height of the tripod. For example, this tripod at maximum height is usually well above me, whereas in this situation it's actually at chest height.
Now, it should be said that just because you have a tripod which extends to 2 meters, doesn't mean that you need to always use it at that height. It's amazing how many people only ever use a tripod in the fully extended position.
There's no denying that having the option to increase your tripod's height is always a good thing, but the downside is that it also increases its weight. So the perfect compromise is to get the tallest tripod you can before it becomes too heavy.
On the subject of weight, for obvious reasons we all want the lightest possible tripod, but there are downsides to shaving off too much weight. And this comes at a sacrifice of stability and durability, 2 things that we'll look at in a moment. Basically, if you're going to compare tripods, don't just compare them on weight alone and go for the lightest one, because this may come back to bite you.
Minimum height is another factor which is often listed in the specs, and this one can be important as you want to have the ability to position your camera as low as possible to give you more compositional options.
This is where having a centre column can severely restrict you, as the length of it becomes a limiting factor of how low your tripod can go.
Another thing you will likely find listed on a spec sheet is maximum load. This is really not usually an issue, as it's unlikely that your camera gear will even come close to the maximum load of any decent tripod.
For example, this tripod here is the one I use for all my big film cameras, and it's stated at supporting up to 30 kilos. Now, there's no camera and lens system that I know of that comes even close to that kind of weight. Also,
if it does only really support 30 kilos, then surely it would collapse if I say swing on it and add double that weight. Damn it. Okay, triple that weight. So maximum load figures really aren't something that you should be concerned about.
But what about the important bits of info which you won't find on any box?
The first one is ease of use, as this is something you can't get a good idea of without trying and testing the tripod in the field.
Trust us when we say that a tripod which you find fiddly, awkward or just not enjoyable to use is about as useful as a third eyebrow, as you'll just end up carrying it around with you and simply finding reasons not to ever use it. We've seen this hundreds of times before, and it's a really unfortunate situation.
A tripod is really a very basic thing. I mean, it has 3 legs which open and close and expand and contract, and that's pretty much it. However, we've seen many models on the market which make this very simple procedure as complicated as possible, where legs might have to be inverted and there's 7 sections to undo. But the worst one of all is the self-leveling tripod, which has motors and batteries in each leg. You want to have a tripod with as fewer leg sections as possible for the maximum height you want to potentially work with. This is because the more leg sections you have, the longer it takes to extend and collapse your tripod. Take these 2 tripods as an example. One has 3 leg sections and the other has 4, yet they both go to the same maximum height. And that's because although this tripod has fewer leg sections, each one is longer. Let's do a side-by-side comparison to see the difference in time it takes to set each one up. Another disadvantage with having more leg sections is that the joints are typically the weakest part of any leg, so the more you have, the less stability. The only plus side of having more leg sections is that the tripod will collapse to a shorter length, making it more convenient to put into a suitcase, for example, when travelling. But don't think that having more leg sections is therefore the answer. Try to avoid buying a tripod with more than 4 leg sections. Otherwise, setting it up and collapsing it will become a bit of a chore, and you'll find every excuse in the book to talk yourself out of it. You'll convince yourself that your 8 stops of image stabilisation combined with a high ISO performance means that you don't actually need a tripod. Trust us, we've seen it 100 times before. You also don't want to have a tripod which has braces between the centre column and the legs, as this prevents you from angling the legs at independent degrees, something which is very useful when working on uneven ground or in tight spaces.
Another important aspect of ease of use is how the leg sections lock. There are 2 types of systems, twist lock and lever lock. Twist locks tend to be favoured by most users as they're easier to maintain. But the most important factor is getting the one which you prefer using, as this is the key to having a tripod which will actually be used.
If choosing twist locks, make sure that they unlock each leg with only 1 twist. Otherwise, this extends the time and effort it takes to extend and collapse each time.
The long and the short of it is that you need to enjoy your equipment to enjoy the process of photography.
Sturdiness is another aspect which you won't find listed on any specification sheet. There are 2 typical materials that tripod legs are made from: alloy and carbon fibre. The former being slightly heavier and more flexible, so the favoured option generally is carbon fibre, although of course it's more expensive. Now, a carbon fibre tube isn't just a carbon fibre tube, because they come in different thicknesses. And I'm not talking about girth here, I'm talking about the thickness of the carbon itself. Kingjoy use 10 times layer tubes, which means they are made from 10 layers of carbon. This slightly adds to the weight, but hugely increases stability. So if you see a carbon fibre tube which shows 6 layers, this is only going to be slightly more than half the thickness of a carbon fibre tube which has 10 layers. More layers do increase the cost, but this is a true sign of a quality product.
When working on soft ground, then you need to remember that no matter how sturdy your tripod is, it's only as solid as the ground it's sitting on. When you have rubber feet on your tripod, then all that happens is that it sits on top of the softness and the whole thing acts as if it's on a waterbed.
Having spiked feet allows the tripod to penetrate through any soft vegetation and into the solid ground below, making a massive difference in stability. The longer the spikes, the more connection you get with the ground. Short, stubby spikes are of no use whatsoever. Some tripods come in different finishes, such as this camouflage one for wildlife photographers.
A feature which has become more popular over recent years is the levelling top plate, which allows the user to get the tripod head perfectly level without having to spend time adjusting the legs. This can save precious time in the field if you want to pan the camera whilst keeping a level horizon.
Another thing which is really important on a tripod is for it to have a removable head.
This allows you to fit the different types of head to suit the photography that you do, such as a fluid head for smooth video work, a gimbal head for use with long lenses, a geared head for precision, a plate head for packing light, or a pistol grip for ultimate speed.
Finally, durability is another very important factor which you won't find listed on the side of any box. Most tripods are good when they are new, but some will fail after just a few months of use. You really want to get one that goes on and on and on like a pair of nun's knickers. Unfortunately, this is only something you'll discover once you've used your tripod for a period of time. Many years ago, I used to use Gitzo tripods, but they kept breaking or failing, and I gave up spending £600 on legs, which lasted less than 2 years. This very tripod here from Kingjoy has been my main workhorse since 2017, and in that time, it's handled pretty much everything the world can throw at it. The twist locks have weather seals to prevent dirt or moisture getting into the screw threads. But even if this does happen, they're easy to clean and reassemble. This one here has been in the salt water on numerous occasions, and as a result, I do have some rusting going on the hook underneath here, and the screws which hold the legs on have discoloured a little bit. But these don't affect the performance of the tripod, and I would say that after 8 years of intense abuse, this one's still in very, very good shape. Kingjoy spend a lot of time and effort testing their professional range of tripods by putting them through all sorts of extreme tests and abuse. So it's no surprise that my one, even though it costs less than the Gitzo equivalent, has lasted 4 times longer and shows no sign of dying anytime soon.
A good tripod is not going to be cheap, so you want it to last, ideally being the only tripod you ever buy. It's not as if they have technology in them which will become outdated after a few years.
All you want it to do is do the job that it was designed to do, and that is support your camera. If you find it enjoyable to use, then you're more likely to use it. Get the weight right and get the height right, and you could find it's your favourite piece of photographic equipment you own.
So hopefully you found that useful. Although the feature wasn't sponsored, all the team at Photography Online do use Kingjoy tripods simply because we consider them to be the best on the market. We often rent them out to customers who come on our trips but prefer not to have to travel with their own tripods. And a lot of the time, the customer who's used it will buy it after a few days as they realise it's better and more convenient than their existing tripods. We sell a wide range of Kingjoy tripods on our online shop so that we can make the gear we use available to everyone. Whether you're looking for a travel tripod such as this one that we gave away on last month's podcast, or something a lot beefier which will save you a fortune on gym membership, we've got something for everyone. So do check out the MC2 Photography shop where you'll find tripods, heads, filters, as well as a load of educational material and of course our Photography Online merchandise. Okay, well, with the exception of tripod related questions, one of the other popular inquiries we receive is about film scanning. Now, we've done features on this before where we've looked at the various pros and cons of different methods, but we haven't had time to go into detail on a specific one. Marcus does a lot of scanning and has many different formats to work with, so he's a good person to give us some tips.
I've been scanning film for 25 years, and I've tried many different techniques over that time. We've done previous features about the various methods of scanning and the comparisons between them, so I'm not going to repeat this here. We'll put a link to the other shows in the video description, so feel free to check those out if you want to see a comparison between using a digital camera, a flatbed scanner, and a drum scan. Today, I want to show you what I've settled on as being the best way to scan medium and large format film. When it comes to 35mm or anything smaller, then this method has its limitations and there's probably better ways to scan that size film. Before I reveal my method though, I thought I would go over some of the pitfalls that I've experienced when using a flatbed scanner in the more traditional ways. The most popular way is to use these film holders, which come with the scanner. There's a 35mm version, a 120 or medium format version, and there's also options for various large format sizes.
I gave up using these a long time ago because they're flawed in a couple of ways. But before we look at why, I want to explain that a scanner, just like a camera, has a plane of focus. And anything above or below that plane of focus isn't going to be sharp. So it's really important that our film is lying at exactly the right position.
In the software, it's possible to change where the plane of focus lies by selecting glass or holder. If we select glass, then as you might expect, the plane of focus is exactly on the surface of the glass. This makes things very easy, as we can simply lay a print down onto the glass, which holds it perfectly flat and at exactly the right distance from the scanner head.
However, this really only works for prints. If we were to lay film directly onto the scanner, then we would probably experience something called Newton rings. Newton rings are formed when you get two shiny surfaces, such as glass and film, that come together and make contact with each other. And once they're in your scan, they're almost impossible to get rid of. So this is where these trays theoretically come into play, because they're designed to hold the film just slightly above the glass and therefore avoid Newton rings. However, they never seem to get the film at exactly the right distance.
On the base of the trays are these spacers, which can be inverted to adjust the tray in a high or low position.
But surely if these are designed to be used with the scanner, then they should hold the film in exactly the right place without having to mess around by adjusting the height. There may be another valid reason for those spacers, but if there is, I'm not aware of it. But let's just assume by some fluke you managed to get your film at exactly the right position. There's still another problem, and that is that these do not hold the film perfectly flat. Now, most film has a slight curl to it, but these will allow it to sag in the middle because they're not being supported anywhere other than the two sides. So we need another way to support the film that's more rigid than what these can offer.
Finally, once the film is in position in the trays, it's impossible to clean, as you can only wipe the middle part of the film, which then pushes any dust towards the edges where it will stay. So all in all, not the best solution.
Some people use a wet tray or a fluid mount system where the film is suspended in an oil-based liquid and then sandwiched between two pieces of glass. Now, that holds the film perfectly flat and the oil prevents any Newton rings from forming, but it does introduce a couple of new problems. Firstly, it's messy and you have to clean your film afterwards because it's covered in liquid. But more importantly, it introduces another piece of glass between the scanner head and your film. And the more pieces of glass that you have to scan through, the less contrast you get and the less sharp your image becomes.
So a few years ago, I got my thinking hat on and thought how I could combine the pros of the tray system, which are that there's no extra glass being placed between the film and the scanner, and the fluid mount system, which holds the film perfectly flat.
After lots of experimentation and hours analysing the results, I've come up with a system that I call the Mango. That's the macadam anti-Newton glass operation. And I believe it's the way to get the best out of any flatbed scanner. With the larger the film area, the better the results.
So let me show you what the Mango is all about and why it works.
This is a piece of optical anti-Newton glass, and it's been designed with a very slight texture on one side, which you can hear if you run your fingernail across it, and that's what prevents the Newton rings from forming. However, it's not totally clear, and so the last thing you'd want to do is scan through this piece of glass. But there's a way around that, and that is to invert it upside down in the scanner with the film taped to the underside.
Let's do this first before looking at the next stage. Obviously, we need to make sure the glass is clean and free of dust on the textured side, and that the back of the film is also free of dust before we sandwich the two together. We can worry about the other surfaces in a moment. I use a low-tack masking tape which is available from any good hardware store, but any tape which doesn't leave a residue should be okay. Just make sure it's not too strong. Remember I mentioned before that most film has a slight curl to it, and it's important that you place the film onto the glass so that the edges curl upwards. If you do it the other way, then you'll never get the film flat. Remember, the only purpose of this glass is to hold the film perfectly flat, so if the film is bulging in the centre, then it's a pointless exercise. You might as well use the trays.
Now, some people claim that it's important to scan film the correct way up, but I've done it both ways and I've analysed the results and I really can't see any difference. So I always position it so that the curl is upwards away from the glass, whether that be the right way round or the wrong way round.
As we tape the edges down, the entire width of the film is now held flat against the glass. But because it's anti-Newton glass, we shouldn't get any Newton rings.
There's one more step that we need to do before we can scan this piece of film, and that is to identify exactly where the plane of focus is for this scanner, and then suspend this film at exactly that height.
Now, I've already made some spacers which elevate my film to the precise height, but you'll need to do some experiments to find the best height for your system. Basically, get a pile of business cards or something similar and put a stack of 3 or so under each corner of the glass. Make sure you don't cover up this sensor, otherwise it will cause problems. Make a high-res scan of a small area of film which has lots of fine detail and you know is sharp. Something such as small text will work really well and allow easy comparison of sharpness. Now repeat the exercise and add a card under each corner of the glass for every scan. Keep doing this until you see an obvious lack of sharpness in the scan.
At this point, you've already passed the plane of focus, so there's no need to continue. Go back and look at your previous scans and identify which one looks the sharpest. Now, for me, on this scanner, it happened to be 7 business cards, but it's going to vary from scanner to scanner and from user to user. After all, there's no set thickness to a business card. But once you've identified the correct height for your scanner, then glue that number of business cards together and make little spacers that go underneath each corner of your glass. I use foam just because it creates less dust than paper.
Once you've got your spacers made, then we need to ensure that the surface of the scanner glass is clean and free of dust, and, most importantly, that the front side of the film is clean. Unlike when using the trays, the film is now easy to wipe. Now it's simply a case of turning your anti-Newton glass upside down on the spacers so that the film is facing the scanner head.
So we've now created a scenario where our film is being held perfectly flat and exactly on the plane of focus. Yet we've not introduced another layer of glass between the scan head and the film, and there's no messy liquid to clean up afterwards.
Now it's just a case of optimizing the scanner parameters on the software you're using to best match the size of the scan you're needing. This will differ from system to system and user to user, so there's little point in going over such settings here.
All I would say is to try and get as much right at the scanning stage rather than relying on tweaking it later in post. If what's coming out of the scanner is good, then it's difficult to go wrong, whereas you can't polish a poo.
Another advantage of this method over the tray is that you can include the film borders if desired, something I think can look really good on the right subject.
So if you want to give Mango a go, then all you're going to need is a piece of optical anti-Newton glass. Now, I use one this size because I sometimes have to scan 8x10 negatives, but if you're only shooting medium format, then you could get away with something a third of this size. But it is useful to have excess glass around the perimeter of the largest film area that you're likely to be working with, because you're going to be handling this all the time, and as you can see, you get fingerprints and grime, and it keeps it away from the important area where the scan's going to be.
I'll leave you with an example of the quality you can get by scanning this way. Here's the full frame of a 6x9 medium format scan, so nothing too big. And here is the detail within that scan.
So I don't know about you, but I do love the look of film, and so knowing how to get the best from a scan is really useful, and it'll be easy for me to remember the man go, as I've always had the attitude that you should never let a good man go. No? Okay, well, that brings us to the conclusion of another show, but if you want to know what we've got planned for next month, the boys are working with animals again as they try to tick off more of the great British icons from their photo challenge list. Now, last time they had a disaster with a cow, so I'm hoping this one will prove equally as challenging. We will also be looking at teleconverters and doing some tests to see if they really do deliver what they promise. Plus, we'll be exploring some of the lesser visited Outer Hebridean islands to see if they are being overlooked by photographers. Until then, take good care, but most of all, take good photos.
So you want it to last, ideally being the only...
1-0.
It's not as if they have technology in them, which is begun.
2-0. Get the weight right and get the height right, and you could find that it's the most 2-1.